It looks like Drake is dating himself by a few decades. Here's your look at the brand new McFarlane toys, Superpowers Robin. Growing up in Gotham City can be complicated, especially when you're a kid who's obsessed with Batman and Robin. For Tim Drake, learning everything about his favorite superheroes eventually led him down the path to becoming one himself, after he deduced the identities of Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson. I guess when it comes to being Robin, third time's the charm. Before we get a closer look at the brand new McFarlane Toys Superpowers Tim Drake Robin, let's grab the tape measure and see how tall this guy stands. As well, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did kindly provide the sample of Robin, as well as a bunch of other Superpowers figures that we will be looking at in upcoming reviews. In the meantime, though, Robin stands about 4 1/4 inches in height, or the figure's going to be about 10.5 centimeters tall. To be compared along with Robin, let's bring in some of the other earlier looked at Superpowers figures, the first of which being the one from this wave. Here's what the figure looks like with the classic cow-looking Batman, who obviously in this case you can see is shorter than Batman. I think it should be the case. I wouldn't want them to be the exact same height. Speaking of Batman, though, let's bring in the other Batman. You can see even how much shorter Robin is when you compare him against that original first wave Batman we got before. A couple of other figures we can also bring in, just the chance, of course, to be able to bring in some other figures from the Superpowers line. Here's what Robin also looks like with Deathstroke on his one side, and again, the Stan, the Scarlet Speedster on the other. Of course, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but Robin doesn't come with any other accessory other than the cape that clips on the back of the figure's body. Batman, for that matter, also didn't come included with any accessories, but you could also make the argument that Batman also came included with closed fists. Robin, at least to his credit, has a gripping hand, but he doesn't come with a batarang or a grapple gun or any gadget that he could wield to be carried around in his other hand. Let's look, though, first quickly at his cape. The cape, as you can see, like the case with before when we looked at Batman, is basically like a C-clip. And then what they've done is they've stitched on the material onto that. The material is fairly stretchy, and it's a nice color, although I would say for a case like Robin, I would imagine that they probably only choose one color, not the case this time around where they would have sewn in a different color altogether on the inside of the cape. But being that this is also Tim Drake, I think I would have gone the route of being a black cape. Now I know, of course, when it comes to Tim Drake's cape, he tends to have color on the inside of it, where it's only black on the outside. But I think I would have sacrificed the color on the inside of the cape, just making the cape completely all black. Because when I look at this Robin, the yellow right away doesn't read to me as Tim Drake. It reads to me like either as Jason Todd, or even earlier than that, Dick Grayson. It still, though, clips onto his body fairly well. It has, though, that overhang that we saw earlier with Batman, so you can kind of tuck the cape in. I'm almost even tempted to take out my sewing supplies, like I do a lot of sewing around here, yeah, right. But I probably will be tempted, I think, to maybe sew some of the cape on the inside of it, just so I think it would fall a little bit better on the figure's body. Now, this is, of course, good if you wanted to have this draped over his shoulders. I feel, though, it brings a little more excess to the table. I think I'd much rather actually have the cape. You can also just even tuck the cape corners underneath itself and sort of have the cape displayed that way also as well. Other than the cape being a little messy on the top, I'm glad to see at least that they're using fabric capes, not only reminiscent of the original Superpowers figure line, but also just because it's always nice from time to time to, of course, get cloth capes. Plastic molded capes work very well for 7-inch scale figures, but I think for a figure line of this size, it really doesn't need to be a sculpted cape. I think I'm glad to see that they actually used a fabric cape this time around. Short of maybe, again, like the coloring that they chose, I do like at least that he does get himself a cape. Getting, though, a closer look, he's very full in the face. Now, maybe he could have been a little leaner, I think, when it comes to the shaping of his face, but it's overall a nice, decent-looking Robin. Most of the time when I tend to think of also Tim Drake Robin, I tend to usually think of a black mask. I'm not sure really why they chose a green mask this time around. It almost seems like they really do want to make this guy look to be more like a classic looking Robin by giving, again, like the yellow cape and then, of course, like the yellow mask. I would have probably changed those colors to both being black. The rest of his outfit, he's fairly full in the figure, quite blocky, in fact. You got some nice printing there on the top corner where it, of course, has the Robin logo, and some nice stitching that I'm happy to report is also sculpted in there. They didn't simply just paint it in place. Everything about the figure is quite clean, very bright. So, of course, you got the green colors there for the top of his shoulders, equally green for his glove, and, of course, his lower tights also there as well. The actual coloring that they handled here for the utility belt, it doesn't look like there's any real paint problems, splotches, or bleeding through of a color underneath it. Everything, again, like on this guy, is colored really well. The articulation on this guy is, again, very limited. Goes to the territory, of course, with these superpowers figures. The original superpowers, of course, would have involved you either squeezing the arms or, in some cases, squeezing the legs if this was a running superhero. In both cases, unfortunately, with these new superpowers figures, you get the look of the superpowers figure, but you don't get the gimmick that went along with it that kind of gave the charm to that original toy line. So when it comes to the articulation for Tim Drake Robin, his head is simply just pegged in place. That will, of course, allow the head to rotate all the way around. No hinging up and down, of course, either. There's swivels straight in the shoulders, and that's it. There's no articulation at all for the hands, but there is posability at least for the legs. You can bring them forward, and of course, you can bring them back. The figure does also have a single hinge in the knee, which would have been the case also with the original toy line also. And there's no articulation anywhere in the boots. But there is, happy to report, peg holes in the undersides of Robin's feet that if you wanted to have the figure displayed onto a display stand, you can do that. Although he stands okay. I mean, sometimes these superpower figures get a little weebly, a little wobbly, but Robin doesn't seem to have that problem. And of course, now we can move this guy over and bring in the original Caped Crusader. You know, again, I had mentioned this when we did do the review of the Batman, that I'm really liking the new approach they're going with when it comes to these new superpowers figures. I like the ones we got before, but to be all honest and fair, the original Batman, while it was more of a modern take of Batman, I know I said that all in the review of Batman, I kind of, again, like the more classic look approach. And even though this isn't a Robin necessarily that would have existed back in the day when superpowers first was around, back then it would have been Dick Grayson. I'm glad to see we actually get a new, more recent Robin. Not the most recent, of course, but we have a more recent Robin making a retro toy. The end result is a nice looking Robin. He's a little thick, he's a little full, and of course the colors of the cape and the mask I wish were black rather than yellow and green. But I think he still turned out to be a great looking figure. Now I can actually have both Batman and Robin sitting inside the Batmobile. The upcoming Batmobile we'll be looking at on the channel, of course, also from McFarlane Toys as well. When I was young and I was collecting superpowers figures, I never had those A-list characters. So Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, forget about it. You never find it in my collection. But I was always one that was collecting B and C-list characters. And because my grandparents, for example, would be going to local gas stations, of course, for the benefit of filling their tank with fuel, but places like Shell and Esso back in the 80s were also offering gas station premiums. That meant they could pick up something a little bit special for the kids to bring home. They had collector's cups, plastic cups. I remember ones from Gremlins. I think they were sold at Esso's. But I think Shells were ones that were good for getting GoBots and superpowers. And even for me to say superpowers, it would be talking like Firestorm, Red Tornado, Martian Manhunter. Don't be expecting a Superman or Batman at a gas station. That kind of stuff wouldn't happen. But through that, I had a small collection of superpowers. And funny enough, I did have a Robin back then. I had the Dick Grayson Robin. He was missing though his cape. I think I found the figure somewhere, but I never had a Batman. Now, though, I can live vicariously without having to go online and pay the crazy prices of getting the older superpowers. McFarlane has sort of done a bit of a detour when it comes to what they were doing before with superpowers. Now giving us ones that I think at least, look a little more like their original retro toys. And where I did praise the thing about the Batman, really liking the look of the Batman having more of a classic look to him, the same can also be said for Robin here. Now, the thing about the Robin is, being that this is Tim Drake, I think some of the colors may be a little off. This color scheme works well, I think, for Jason Todd or Dick Grayson, but I don't know if it works as well necessarily for a Tim Drake. I think rather, instead of having yellow cape and green mask on his face, I would have rather had those both in black. Black, of course, you would have had to sacrifice some of the inner yellow coloring of his cape, but obviously if they only could choose one fabric color, I think I would rather have gone with black than instead yellow. Other than that, though, it's a nice looking figure. He's missing, of course, the original gimmick that kind of gave the charm to the original Superpowers toy line. But if you can overlook the fact that this toy line now is missing that gimmick, they're still nice looking figures. And I'm really liking, again, what they're doing with the approach with the newest wave versus maybe what we got with the first wave. What do you guys think of Robin? Let me know down below in the comments section. And do you also remember gas station premiums? Funny enough, though, just recently, my mom reached out to me because, again, they were moving some of the stuff around in their basement, and she came across some old Esso Gremlins collector's cups. She reached out to me and said, hey, listen, I'm going to be throwing these out. Do you want them? And I said, heck yeah. I probably replied right away, seconds after reading that message. And those collector's cups are actually upstairs in my office. You guys let me know if you'd like to see me do a video of those. But what do you guys think? Do you guys remember those gas station premiums. And what gas station premiums do you remember collecting? GoBots. GoBots was another one I was very heavily into collecting because, again, like a lot of times my grandparents were just picking up gas. They were getting gas and they were, of course, hitting and grabbing a few premiums on the way home. If you guys also enjoyed this video and would like to certainly hit it with a like, why not? If you guys are also wanting to stick around, because of course we are going to be looking at some more Superpowers figures, thanks again to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide the sample of this. But if you haven't already done so, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and that you're also turning on the bell notification, and keep your peepers peeled to this channel because there will be more content, Superpowers content, coming your way. Of course, as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.